You know, how sometimes you just think back to like those cozy nights when you'd be reading aloud to your kids,
Yeah.
maybe something like Where the Wild Things Are
Yeah.
or Goodnight Moon.
Yeah, those were the days.
Well, today's deep dive is about a book that, I mean, honestly, it's captivated generations. Alice's Adventures in Wonderland.
Oh, a classic.
But we're not just going to be like revisiting the story itself.
Yeah.
We're going way deeper, like down the rabbit hole, you could say,
Yeah.
into how it was even created in the first place.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah. And to help us with that, we'll be using the History Daily podcast episode called Lewis Carroll Imagines Wonderland.
Okay.
And get ready for some twists and turns, folks, because the true story behind this, like, world-famous children's book, it's even more fascinating than you might think.
Well, you know what's so captivating to me about Alice in Wonderland is how it all started. You
Right.
know, it all came from a little girl, Alice Liddell,
Yeah.
and a man who, well, let's just say he lived a bit of a double life.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
Let's unpack all that.
Yeah.
So we have this world-famous story, and we know it came from, like, this real girl and this mysterious guy, but where did it all actually begin? Like, how did this story come to be?
All right, so the story starts with a guy named Charles Dodgson.
Okay.
He was a mathematics lecturer at Oxford back in the mid-1800s.
Mm.
And, you know, you wouldn't usually think that a math whiz would be into like whimsical tales or anything.
Yeah.
But Dodgson actually had like this secret passion for writing and storytelling.
Really?
Yeah. In fact, he even created this homemade magazine called the Rectory Magazine. And it was full of all these imaginative stories and illustrations.
Wow, so we've got a serious academic moonlighting as like a creative writer.
Yeah.
Now that's intriguing. But how did he go from like those early creative explorations to, a masterpiece like Alice's Adventures in Wonderland? Like, how did that leap happen?
Well, that's where Alice Liddell comes in.
Yeah.
And a very important boat trip.
Okay.
So picture this, all right? It's a sunny July afternoon. The year is 1862. And Dodgson is rowing a boat on the River Thames with the three Liddell sisters.
Mm.
And to keep them entertained, he starts improvising a story about a girl named Alice who falls down a rabbit hole.
I could just see it, like the water, the trees, the sun, and these little girls just listening to this amazing story. What a magical moment.
It really was. And you know what? It was Alice who was just completely enchanted by the story.
Hmm.
She actually begged Dodgson to write it down for her.
Wow.
So really, that's the spark that lit the fire for Alice's Adventures in Wonderland.
So from just a simple boat ride to a full-blown literary phenomenon. That's
Yeah.
incredible. But I imagine like taking that story and turning it into a real book probably wasn't very easy.
No, not at all. Dodgson was a total perfectionist.
Yeah.
It took him years of writing and rewriting and just painstakingly crafting each chapter.
Wow.
He poured his heart and soul into it, and you can just feel that dedication when you read the final work.
It's amazing how much work goes into like making a story seem so effortless and whimsical.
Yeah.
But I mean, the effort definitely paid off because the book was a huge hit.
Oh, absolutely. When Alice's Adventures in Wonderland was finally published in 1865, it became a sensation overnight. People of all ages loved it. Even Queen Victoria was a fan.
Oh, wow.
It's proof that Dodgson's storytelling is timeless. It still resonates with people even today.
It's just incredible how a story from a lazy summer afternoon could capture the imagination of like the whole world. But, as with most great stories, I feel like there's usually some kind of twist or something unexpected.
Right.
So is there something else to this story?
Indeed there is. Sadly, Dodgson's friendship with the Liddell family kind of fell apart after the book came out.
Oh,
And then there are all those questions and rumors surrounding his relationship with Alice, like a shadow hanging over this magical tale.
See, this is where things get really interesting. It's like
Yeah.
we're peeking behind the curtain and seeing that an author's life can be just as complex as their creations.
Exact.
Tell me more about this controversy. What's the deal with all that? Like, what are we really dealing with here?
Well, so the controversy basically comes from allegations that Dodgson, maybe had inappropriate feelings for Alice.
Hmm.
Like years later, there was this journalist named Florence Baker Linnan,
Okay.
and she published a biography claiming that the Liddell family cut ties with Dodgson because he was attracted to Alice.
Oh, wow.
But the thing is, these claims are only based on like an interview with Alice's older sister, and this was decades after it all happened.
So we're talking about like secondhand information. and no real proof. That
Yeah.
doesn't seem very reliable.
Exactly. There's nothing to really back it up. No letters, no diaries, no firsthand accounts from that time. And we have to remember we're dealing with people from a very different time period. So we can't just apply today's standards to what happened back then.
That's true. We always see history through the lens of like, our own current values and all.
Yeah.
It's easy to misinterpret things that way. But what about Dodgson's photographs? The ones he took of young girls, including Alice. Don't those suggest something was off?
It's true. Dodgson was really into photography.
Yeah.
And yeah, some of his pictures looking back now can seem a bit unsettling.
Right.
But you have to think about it in the context of like Victorian England.
Hmm.
Back then, taking pictures of children in different poses, even like partially clothed, sometimes it wasn't really seen as strange.
Yeah.
It was more of an artistic thing. Like they saw it as a way to capture innocence.
So what we might consider inappropriate today was seen as totally normal back then. It really shows how much things can change over time.
For sure. Judging people from the past by today's standards is, well, it's just not fair.
I see your point. It sounds like there's just a ton of speculation going on.
Mm.
Makes it hard to separate truth from fiction. It's interesting, though, how all this controversy about Dodgson seems to overshadow the actual story of Alice in Wonderland and like how it was created.
That's a great point. There's so much more to this story than just the controversy.
Right.
Let's dig a bit deeper into how Dodgson went from being this math guy, Charles Dodgson, to this famous author, Lewis Carroll.
Yeah, let's do that.
You mentioned his homemade magazine earlier, the Rectory magazine. What kind of stuff was in there? Anything that like hints at the world he would create in Wonderland?
Oh, it's full of fun stuff, playful stories, poems, even some little drawings he did himself. And it's not all just silly stuff.
Oh.
You can see these little hints of absurdity and wordplay, and he was really into logic and dreams, all very much in line with the kind of mind that would write Wonderland.
It's like we're getting a sneak peek into his imagination before Wonderland was even born.
Exactly. There's even this one story where a character falls down a well and meets talking animals.
Wow, sounds familiar.
Right. And even his pen name, Lewis Carroll, that adds another layer to the whole transformation. Do you think he chose that name to like separate his academic life from his writing life?
Maybe.
It's a good question. It actually wasn't a deliberate choice, more like a happy accident.
Oh, real?
Yeah, so he submitted a poem to a magazine, right? And the editor was worried about Dodgson's reputation as a serious academic.
I see.
So the editor suggested a pen name to protect him. Dodgson came up with a few options, and they settled on Lewis Carroll.
So it's kind of like fate played a role in bringing Lewis Carroll and Alice in Wonderland into the world.
Right. It's crazy how these little things can have such a big impact. But speaking of Alice, let's rewind back to that famous boat trip on the Thames. Can you like paint us a picture of that day, the day that started it all?
I'd love to hear more about that.
Okay, so imagine Victorian England, right? It's a beautiful summer day. The sun's shining, the Thames is sparkling, and there's this gentle breeze. And there's Charles Dodgson, this young guy who loves telling stories. And he's rowing a boat with the three Liddell sisters, Lorena Edith and 10-year-old Alice.
Sounds lovely.
Oh, it was. As they're going down the river, Dodgson starts making up this story about a girl named Alice who falls down a rabbit hole. And she ends up in this crazy world. A world with a white rabbit who's always in a hurry, a Cheshire cat that's always grinning, and a Mad Hatter who throws these endless tea parties. The girls are just hooked on every word. Their imaginations are going wild.
And Alice, the little girl Dodgson described as grave and quiet, was especially into it. She just had to have him write the story down so she could keep reading it.
It's amazing to think that simple story told on a sunny afternoon became like one of those famous children's books ever written.
But it wasn't all smooth sailing from that boat trip to a published book.
Oh.
Dodgson was so careful and precise. He spent years making the story perfect, rewriting chapters, changing words, making sure it all flowed together perfectly. It was like a blend of whimsy and logic all at once.
It's like the writing process itself was as magical as the story.
I know, right? He even asked his friend, the author George MacDonald, to read it.
Oh, wow.
And MacDonald loved it. He told Dodgson he had to get it published. He saw how special it was, how it could appeal to both kids and adults.
That's when Alexander Macmillan comes in.
Is that right?
The publisher who took a chance on this unique children's book.
Yep, that's him. Macmillan saw something special in Alice's adventures in Wonderland. He knew it wasn't just a silly story. It was actually brilliant. It challenged the way people thought about writing and explored these deep themes like identity and logic and how absurd life can be. But even though the publisher, Dodgson didn't relax. He was involved in every step of the process. Like a true artist, he wanted to make sure his vision came to life exactly how he imagined it.
I read somewhere that he was really picky about the illustrations, too.
Oh, he was. He wanted them to be just right to capture the characters and the spirit of the story. I think he even rejected the first set of illustrations and made them start over.
Can you imagine being that illustrator? Getting your work rejected by Lewis Carroll himself?
The pressure. It's like his mathematical mind was at work even when it came to art.
Totally. He had such a good eye for detail, and he understood how pictures could make his words even better. Working with John Tenniel, the illustrator, was key to creating the images we all know and love today. And even the book's title changed, right? It wasn't always Alice's Adventures in Wonderland.
Oh, that's right. What was it before?
It was originally called Alice's Adventures Underground.
Huh, interesting.
Macmillan actually suggested the new title, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. Pretty good call, right? It just fits the story so well.
It really does. It makes you feel like you're stepping into a world of magic. And of course, the book was a huge hit.
Instant success. People of all ages couldn't get enough of it. Even Queen Victoria wanted a copy.
It's incredible how a story that started on a boat ride became so famous. It's amazing.
It really is.
Oh,
But unfortunately, it seems like right when the book took off, that's when things started going downhill between Dodgson and the Liddell family.
yeah, it's sad. And that's when the rumors about his relationship with Alice started spreading. It adds this whole other layer to the story, a layer of mystery and complexity.
It really does. It's like there's this hidden secret behind everything, a mystery that we're still trying to figure out. Yeah, it really is like one of those optical illusions where you think you see one thing and then you look closer and there's something else hidden there.
Mm.
So what happened? Why did things go bad between Dodgson and the Liddells? What caused all that?
That's the big mystery, right? Nobody knows for sure. Some people think it was because of Dodgson's feelings for Alice, but others think it might have been something between Dodgson and Alice's mother. Or maybe it was just how things were back then, Victorian society and all that. We just don't have enough information to know for sure.
It's frustrating. We want a clear answer, but sometimes history just doesn't give us that.
That's right. It reminds us that these were real people with real lives and real relationships. We can't just look back from today and understand everything about their experiences.
This whole thing with Dodgson and the Liddells, it shows how hard it can be to really understand the past.
Definitely. It teaches us to be careful about how we look at history. We have to remember our own biases and not jump to conclusions when we don't have all the facts.
So where does that leave us? We've got this amazing author, this timeless story, and all these unanswered questions. Does this controversy ruin the magic of Alice in Wonderland?
I don't think so. We can still love Dodgson's work and appreciate how brilliant it is, while also understanding that he was a complex person who lived in a very different time. It's about seeing both sides of the story.
It reminds us that even our heroes are human. They make mistakes. They have flaws. And maybe that's what makes this story so powerful. It's not just a fun escape. It also makes us think about the things in life that aren't so easy to understand. The line between reality and imagination and the mysteries of the human heart.
That's a beautiful way to put it. Maybe that's the true legacy of Alice in Wonderland. It makes us think, it challenges us, and it makes us wonder. It's a story that stays with you long after you've finished reading it.
So if we had to sum up this deep dive into Alice in Wonderland, what would you say is the most important thing we've learned?
Well, I think it's that even the stories we love the most can come from complicated places. And sometimes the most interesting parts of a story are the things we don't know, the mysteries and the places where imagination and reality blend together.
It really shows how powerful a good story can be. It takes us to new worlds, it challenges our beliefs, and it stays with us long after it's over. Well, this deep dive has taken us on quite a journey. We've explored the magical world of Alice in Wonderland, learned about the fascinating life of Charles Dodgson, and uncovered the mysteries that still surround this amazing story. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Alice in Wonderland. Be sure to tune in next time for another captivating story from history.